Hello and welcome to ShePack. I'm your host, Lenice Wolf, and today I'm joined by Pam Boiros, a Chief Marketing Officer and Marketing Consultant at Bridge Marketing Advisors. She is a seasoned marketing leader with success in corporate training and education technology sectors. Not only has Pam made a significant mark in the HR software market, but she also possesses a fervent passion for propelling growth companies forward with strategic go-to-market plans that amplify pipeline and revenue. Now, in today's episode, we're discussing the future of work and empowered female professional. Welcome to ShePack, Pam. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today. Super excited for our conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for this conversation as well. Now, before we jump in, tell us about your journey and what led you to become a CMO and marketing consultant.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career in sales, enjoyed sales, but the highs of and lows of chasing quota were just not for me. So I had studied marketing in college, was always interested in marketing, and basically moved into and was more of a hybrid sort of in sales and marketing, strategic partnerships, product management, that kind of thing. And for a while, I was actually out of marketing, pure marketing, doing product management for a software company. And when I came back, I was for that same company, I was promoted to global VP of marketing. They were looking for somebody internally who knew the company, knew the products. And I was just amazed. This was really sort of during the run-up of digital marketing, how scientific marketing had become. Because when I had started my career, it was kind of, oh, here's your budget, spend it, and then in 6 months, we'll ask you if you think you did anything. And because marketing was just difficult to measure and everything cost money. So by the time, I went back into marketing during that 13-year period, people could tell in 48 hours if an ad had landed in a digital site. So super interesting time to go back into marketing. So did that a bunch and then became a fractional consulting and advisory person in 2016. I was CMO at a company called Mequilibrium for 5 years, which I just wrapped up. That's an interesting company in the digital emotional well-being space. It's going to tie into our conversation a little bit here. So right now I'm doing what I love best, which is helping companies in the HR tech and in the learning tech space to grow and thrive.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with you. It's funny. One, I didn't know actually, if I take a step back, that you started your career in sales and then moved to marketing. I have the same journey and very similar to you. I don't know. I don't know if it was the pressure or having your pay at risk. But again, I studied marketing and, that was my love. And I think part of that love is that balancing of art and science, which you had alluded to. So
that's right.
Yeah, let's jump into the future of work. Now, with AI on the rise, and honestly, the topic that's inundating all of our LinkedIn feeds, which industries and roles are the most vulnerable to replacement?
Yeah, it's a great conversation. And you're right, it is everywhere in the news right now. AI is going to have an impact on all sorts of roles. So in the past, when we think about past technological revolutions, they've mostly been about automating manual labor. For a long time, automation was focused on any job that I affectionately call dirty, dull, or dangerous, the 3Ds. And that makes a ton of sense, right? If you can take a job that's dirty, dull, or dangerous and have a robot do it or some other automated system, that makes a ton of sense. But we're now seeing the impact on jobs outside of those categories. And this is the first time that we're seeing that technology is focused directly on what we've called white-collar jobs. And, I think it's important to keep in mind that AI has the capacity to both displace jobs, but also to create jobs. And estimates suggest that AI may replace around 300 million full-time jobs globally by automating tasks. But as new potential opens up, I think we just need to have a growth mindset about it, because completely new jobs that don't exist today are going to pop up as well. And I know we're going to link in the show notes an article from the World Economic Forum. I think it's important to read up on all these changes because they're affecting everybody from reputable sources. And this post from the World Economic Forum, I think, is one certainly worth reading. And I think it's just worthwhile for everybody to think about AI has really been with us for decades, but it's only being obviously seen in our day-to-day. It's been a really slow roll. But if you've ever used Siri on your iPhone or Alexa on your device, if you've ever used Waze to get directions to a new place, if you've ever had an email or document suggest the possible next word for you, all of that is AI in action. But people refer to what's called the ChatGPT moment, which happened in December of 2022, as really a watershed moment in AI. And that's really when the power of generative AI showed up on the scene. And all of a sudden, generative AI is looking like it can do things that we thought only humans could do. And that's really why the talk about AI has ramped up so much recently.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a fascinating article that you have shared, and I encourage everybody to read it. As Pam mentioned, I will make sure to include it in the show notes. What I loved in the example from the article, if I can pull something out, was they used this like example of a human alarm clock. And I had no idea, but it was a job that people had used before the Industrial Revolution, where someone would go to people's windows with a long stick and wake them up until the invention of a mechanical alarm clock. I don't know why, but I'm obsessed with just learning about that story. And I think it's because it's such a great example of how technology can disrupt careers. Now, how can women identify potential threats and start future-proofing their careers?
Yeah, it's a great point. So let's just go back in history a little bit. So in 1950, the number one job for American women was, no surprise, in the secretarial occupation. There are about 4 million people working as secretaries at that time. Let's fast forward to 2020, and the most common jobs for American women is secretaries and administrative assistants. 96% of folks in that role are women. And guess what? There's 4 million people in that occupation, again, still currently. So you're like, wait a second, 1950 to now? But when you think about it, the GDP has grown 10x that. So if you're looking at it from a pure numbers perspective, really 90% of those secretarial jobs have gone away, right? We haven't missed them sort of because all of that growth. But when you think about it, that's kind of some of the dynamics that are at play. So women need to be, I just share that example because that's a role that is typically been sort of, to use another term, a pink collar job, right? A job that women have. But women need to be educated about the impact of AI on their jobs overall. And you don't need to be an AI expert to determine this. Jobs like customer service, being a receptionist, being any kind of clerk, any kind of data entry, accounting, bookkeeping, those jobs are particularly susceptible to AI automation due to the repetitive nature of their tasks. And I think each of us can have an honest assessment, need to have an honest assessment with ourselves about our job's tasks and ask ourselves how much of that job potentially can be automated. Even if you can't imagine the tools, even if you can't imagine the process, could it be automated? And over time, most of us will have multiple careers. Women change careers. I encourage women to change careers. It's never too late. So if you have alternative interests, consider what many people my age are doing, which is like an encore career. So something they've always been interested in. And there's all sorts of different times in your life that you may be more or less able to make a move like that, depending on your partner, the age your kids are, if you're supporting your parents or helping your parents, your financial situation, all of those. So keep an eye for those windows in your life when maybe making a career change is most appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And if I'm not mistaken, I hope I don't get the name wrong, but I think it was a post from Christopher Penn, who speaks a lot about AI. And he was talking to how everybody needs to look at what are the repetitive tasks that are in your role, because soon those will be replaced by AI. And as women, we also need to start educating ourselves on the impacts of AI. So can you share maybe some of the resources or others that you follow in the space to get more enabled?
Yeah, absolutely. One thought about that is a role that you can take on is, rather than stick your head in the sand and say, I hope AI isn't going to take my job away, but to be an AI change agent in your company. Most of the job loss that I think we're going to see in the near term is going to be organizations not refilling jobs that come up due to turnover or whatever. And if you can be one of those AI change agents in your company and say, hey, let's bring in AI to automate this task, right? I think Microsoft is famous for saying every now and then you have to disrupt yourself. So, but what are you going to be? You're going to be extremely valuable to that organization in a whole bunch of new and different ways. So rather than, being afraid of it, consider embracing it. So I'll just throw that in
I
there.
love
So in
that.
terms of resources, my favorite one, and Lace, you and I have talked about this, is an organization called the Marketing AI Institute. And even though we're both marketers and it sounds like it's only for marketers, they have two great resources that are appropriate for literally anybody in any role. They have a weekly podcast that's called the Artificial Intelligence Show. And a new episode drops every Tuesday. And in it, the two hosts, a guy named Paul Reitzer and Mike Kaput, they unpack the AI news from the previous week. So all week long, they kind of gather the headlines, they decide what they're going to talk about, and then they talk about it on this show that records on a Monday and releases on a Tuesday. So talk about near real time. And they speak about it in such plain English that you can really understand what's going on. The first episode you listen to, you're probably going to be in over your head. You're going to be like, who is this company they're talking about? Who is this person they're talking about? Because the same sort of characters, company and people kind of pop up a lot. But over time, you'll start to pick up on some of the terminology. It'll get much more familiar to you, and it'll be a really good read or listen. So if you drive, if you walk, if you do you're on an exercise bike or you're folding laundry, whatever you're doing, put that podcast on and listen and learn. There's also a newsletter if you prefer to kind of like click through and read rather than listen. But for me, that's appointment podcasting every Tuesday when I listen to that. And then similar, there's a bunch of other people that I follow. I sort of operate at the intersection of HR, marketing, and AI. And there's a lot of people in that space that have really smart things to say, whether it's on X or Threads or LinkedIn, or they publish a newsletter. So again, there's so much information in the world that's free these days. Find the people in your industry, maybe in your geography, maybe related to the university you went to, if you went to one, people that are sort of in your circle who are really have an authentic expertise on AI. Start to follow them, start to engage with them, and start to learn from them.
Yeah, I will second what you say, Pam, because I am a huge advocate of the Marketing AI Institute. And I think just like you had mentioned, at the heart, they're storytellers. They don't have, the speeds and feeds. They don't talk to that piece because that's not who they are. And I do find every Tuesday, that is my go-to because there's so much that's happening in the space that, I think it's for anyone who's even interested that is not technical, such a great resource. Now, what are some of the emerging fields and industries that prioritize skill resistance to AI automation?
Yeah, as the machines get better at doing what they do best, I just think humans will need to increasingly embrace the capabilities and characteristics that are uniquely human. Empathy, emotional intelligence, caring, genuine caring. So, and the good news is, I guess, is there's actually a huge deficit of folks in those kinds of jobs. So nursing is a great example. There is a nationwide nursing shortage that's only gotten worse since the pandemic. In 2022, the American Hospital Association estimated that 500,000 nurses would leave the field in the near term, and that the total shortage would be 1.1 million. And it varies by location, by state, but that's something to think about, if you have that interest. Similarly, mental health professionals, there's a significant shortage of that. And that's really exacerbated by a couple of things. One is this way more demand post-pandemic as people have more of an increased need for those services, and there's a lot more destigmatization about getting help for mental health issues. So that's obviously driving demand. But practitioners in the field are aging and they're not being replaced at the same rate as people who are retiring out of the field. So we know like a lot of those jobs are high training. To be a psychiatrist, that is a medical doctor, right? Probably not going to make a career change and to do that into your mid-50s. Maybe you would, but there's a lot of other coaching and counseling, social workers, things that you can do that don't require that level of education. Obviously, a lot of mental health does, of course. And then there's other what are called sort of affiliated health professions. Anything that's going to require physical contact with another human being, caretaking roles, but physical therapists, occupational therapists, dental assistants. And here's a surprising one that I hadn't really thought about, but vet techs, okay? By 2030, the U.S. will need 41,000 additional veterinarians, again, doctors, and an additional 133,000 vet techs. In some places around the country, you can, if you have a pet, you cannot find a vet that's taking, or a vet practice that's
So
taking
true.
new patients. Yep.
Yeah.
So vet techs are going to be picking up the slack. I think that role is going to continue to be professionalized. So if you love animals, that's a 2-year degree. That is a very viable career path. And I just have to mention entrepreneurship here. I mean, entrepreneurship is so broad, so vast, but it's never been a better time to start a business. You can literally start a business using your phone and nothing else. You can start a business for a few, $100, secure a domain name, get started. And if you have a passion for something, ask yourself if you can turn that into a business. You might be surprised. And you can start it as a side hustle. A lot of people do that. They start their passion area as a side hustle while they're doing a 9 to 5, and then they make that cutover when they're able to.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a human element that it can't be replaced. And it's such a good, I never thought about like the vet industry. I know for me, I have 2 fur babies and it's near impossible to try to get an appointment. So I think it's only, that matter's only going to create more opportunities for those who are seeking them. And understanding the future of work in the face of AI automation leads us to consider, which industries that we should thrive. How do you see skilled trades fit into this evolving landscape? And why should they be key areas for women to explore?
Totally. I mean, skilled trade jobs, and these are occupations involving skilled labor and manual work. So examples include construction, electrician, plumber, HVAC installation repair, masons, automotive repair, all that kind of stuff. These are all job areas, first of all, that are AI proof because, again, of that physical element, but they also have massive deficits in the availability. So just like you've having a hard time getting a vet, probably having the same kind of hard time finding a plumber, an electrician, or a skilled tradesperson because of that deficit.
Yeah. How do you feel, though, that we can tackle maybe some negative perceptions about those professions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's long been conventional wisdom. Those are men's jobs, right? And our family, our friends, our counselors in high schools may have steered us away from those jobs, even if we had a particular interest. Again, they're good paying jobs and they don't require a college education. Just by way of example, electricians on average make about $30 an hour across the country. And the top 10% nationwide earn about $100,000 a year. And pay varies wildly by location, of course, but good paying jobs. But let's be careful. Let's not fool ourselves, right? Skilled trade jobs are hard in tough working conditions. They may be physically demanding. There may be sexism on the job. I mean, that is still a reality because you might be one of 10% women on the job. But if the work is interesting to you, you should learn more about the opportunities, train for them, see what's required to go into those fields. A lot of times, again, because they're trying to recruit people, and a lot of times they're trying to recruit non-traditional candidates, women and people of color, there may be job training opportunities and there may be open houses at unions and things like that to learn more about these jobs. Again, as I said, these are, skilled labor and manual work is less exposed to AI disruption. So we were talking about if you have interest in this, and I think a lot of times people aren't necessarily sure where they have interest. And I am a big one for taking an assessment. And there is an assessment, a very particular assessment called the I Seek Clusters Assessment. And maybe we can include a link to that as well. There's an online free assessment you can take, and there's actually a downloadable worksheet version of the assessment that you can take. So either an online one or a worksheet. And it has you rate activities. Oh, there's a huge list of activities. And do you enjoy them? It's a very simple kind of question. It talks about your personal qualities, your preferred school subjects, and then it suggests preferred career clusters across these 16 different areas. So again, it's available for free. And it's funny, I just retook this assessment recently. I'm doing some work in the assessment space, and I'm a junkie for any assessment. I'll take any assessment if it helps me to learn myself better, right? And so I took the assessment just a couple of weeks ago, and mine came back. These are the top 3 cluster areas: education and training, which I've spent a bunch of my time in; marketing and sales, which is my chosen path; and then hospitality and tourism, which for me is not a surprise at all because I love events and I love parties, and probably in a sliding doors other world, I would be, running a hotel or something somewhere. So it really got me right, but it can help you if you're not really sure what you like, but you're really interested in. It can help translate for you those interests into some careers to explore.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I love an assessment, whether it's Myers-Briggs, Strength Finder. I will, if it's free, I will go and take it, which is what I did. And I will include the link in the show notes. Now, it's funny because with my assessment, man, I would have loved this when I was, just getting into college or even after college to really understand that question of like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And just like being directionally pointed into areas that I should consider. Now, interestingly enough, mine was very similar to yours, Pam. It was education and training, which, that's kind of my love as a leader to coach, and then marketing and sales, which has been my career. The one interesting piece was human services, which it may be too at the point of where I'm at in the season that I'm at in my life in giving and wanting to help others. So I thought it was actually really interesting, and I encourage everybody else to take it. Now, are there other hidden lucrative fields that we tend to overlook that do require skill sets that humans excel at?
Well, I think what's interesting for me to have watched two brand new industries emerge over the past decade or so. I mean, it's really rare that there's a brand new industry. The last industry to be new is really technology, and that's been with us for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
But the two that I'm talking about are renewable energy and the cannabis industry. So two totally different industries. But renewable energy, obviously, which is such a structure, everything from wind energy, solar energy, methane, gas, hydrogen, it is such a fascinating area. And whenever a new industry is, we'll talk about cannabis in a second, but whenever any new industry is created, they need all of the infrastructure around it, which means that if you are a technician, there's work there. If you're a marketer, there's work there. If you are a policy person, there's work there. So whenever there's a new industry, the whole infrastructure behind that industry needs to be set up. Again, same thing with cannabis, right? So cannabis is not legal in every state, but recreational adult use in 24 states and medical use in 40 states. And that number just keeps increasing year on year. So that's another whole industry that's got a retail component, a marketing component, a growing component, right? So the good thing about brand new industries is that new opportunities pop up. There's not as many people who are so-called experts, so you can become an expert pretty quick if you're ahead of the average person. They pay more than traditional industries because they're really trying to ramp up fast. And you have a much better chance for advancement because that opportunity is there. So if you're interested in either of those new industries, again, I would encourage you to kind of look around, get signed up for newsletters, just see what kind of jobs are there, see what kind of pay they have, and see if something fits. And again, we talked about entrepreneurship already, but that is sort of, to me, an evergreen because you're making your own world. And, not exclusively, but many entrepreneurs can go on to earn very, very good livings.
Yeah, I had to nerd out on this because I do think it's fascinating with the rise of these industries, especially given the medical cannabis was legalized in 1996 and then the recreational legalization started in 2012. It just highlights the rapid potential of change and the emergence of lucrative, unforeseen careers that we never would have even had on our roadmap. Now, let's shift gears. With the rise of AI, many women may be concerned about being overlooked. So, how can women become strong advocates for themselves in a job market that is so heavily influenced by AI today?
Yeah, I think this is something women struggle with more than men. Imposter syndrome, although that is gender neutral, I see a lot more women with imposter syndrome. The dirty little secret is everybody's got imposter syndrome. Some people just hide it better than others, right?
Agreed.
So I think once you realize that's, to me, was very empowering when I realized, I'm not the only person who feels this way. But I would say build a network of your mentors, women and men, the people who will give you the honest feedback, the people who will be a sounding board, the people you can bring any kind of crazy idea to, and they'll give you good, honest feedback, people who will advocate for you. So sometimes these people are former bosses, former colleagues, former customers, former clients. You never know where your network's going to take you. But I really, truly believe in building up a good network so that you've got those people at your disposal. And as you learn more about what roles are best for you and you're working in a role that is a good fit for your skills and interests and expertise, your confidence will grow. It can't help but grow because you're going to be working at the intersection of really where I think you probably should be working.
Yeah, I agree too that imposter syndrome is so gender neutral. And I feel like it's a lot of the conversations that I had with men where they said, Lanice, I felt like an imposter. And I'm like, what? I thought that was just a woman thing. And, but it's awesome. And I think it's very empowering when people are so vulnerable and share that. I also think that part of, building resilience, there's this kind of saying of being a lifelong learner. What does lifelong learning truly look like to you? And how do we implement it in our lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am an unapologetic lifelong learner. I have been so since before it was trendy, but these days everyone needs to be a lifelong learner. It used to be that you'd go to school, you'd go to college, you'd get training, and you'd become a something, right? You were an accountant, you're a teacher, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, whatever you are. And you'd go and do that for the rest of your career based on those skills that you gained. Yeah, maybe you had to have continuing professional credits or something like that. But for the most part, you would build that foundation. These days, skills become outdated quickly, and each of us have to adapt and reinvent ourselves, and potentially multiple times during our careers. So we can either view that as a drag and an aggravation and it's stressful, or we can view it as an opportunity to adapt and change and perhaps get ourselves into another way of working that's a better fit to who we are as a person at that point in our lives. So the good news is there's never been so much learning on every topic imaginable available one click on the web. So if you want to explore new areas, if you want to explore additional areas in your current field of study, you can do that. And I think those skills are really valuable. Where I think probably has happened to most of us is the first 12 years of your formal education, you are subjected to what the system says you should take as a first grader, second grader, 12th grader, whatever that is. And it sometimes squeezes the joy of learning out of people. But as humans, we learn all the time. We are wired that way. Think about how infants and babies and toddlers and little kids learn all the time. But then being put into that forced environment squeezes that desire out of you. So I would say channel your inner 5 or 6-year-old before you were subject to that, and really use that person's mindset as the inspiration for being a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I love the parallels that you used in that, because I agree. Like we end up adapting and changing, and so does our skill set. And I think constantly learning, we get to integrate those new things and have that as part of our career. How do we develop resilience in the face of potential career roadblocks caused by automation?
Yeah. So resilience is the ability to bounce back from stress, adversity, failure, challenges, or even trauma. And it's not just about surviving these challenges, but it's about growing and thriving in the face of them, to actually becoming better on the other side of those challenges. And no two ways about it. Threats to our careers can mean threats to our identity and our livelihood, and those are stress-inducing situations. So stress involves being able to manage this stress effectively, maintaining a positive outlook and being adaptive to change. So it's really not what happens to us, because bad stuff's going to happen. That's just life. But how we react that matters. So anybody can learn to become more resilient. So let's think about something related. Okay, let's think about this scenario. Say you're in a job. It's an okay job. The work's okay. The colleagues are okay. The commute's okay. But some little voice is telling you that you might want to get another job to maybe earn more, be more challenged, or whatever. So think about this hypothetical new job. What happens is our brains are wired for the negative. And this is really self-preservation, because when we were out on the tundra with the tigers, right, like being defensive and being wired for risks and threats was how we survived. But it doesn't serve us as well anymore. So when we think about that hypothetical new job, we're like, well, what if the work is boring or really hard and I can't do it? Or what if the people are jerks? And what if the commute is a nightmare? And then we remember that our existing job is okay, so we don't want to go into a worse situation. So what we typically can't envision is the possible good things that you can really only discover after you actually make the move, right? So maybe you end up saying, oh, hey, there's a daycare center right next door to this new job that's cheaper and closer than my current one. hey, this company offers half-day Fridays in the summer. They have a better tasting coffee in the kitchen than my current job. Now, the person next to me is a yoga nut like I am, and they just recommended an awesome new studio. Like, you can't imagine that stuff because until you're in it. So how many times have somebody said, oh, I was really hemming and hawing, but once I got there, wow, I'm so glad I made the decision. Yeah. So sometimes you really got to get over that hump. And, a little bit of that is certainly tied to resilience. Now, another example that many of us might have faced during COVID, right? Many of us moved to a work from home overnight, right? Mm-hmm. And when we were preparing for that, there was a lot of turmoil in the world at the time. We thought about all the horrible things of, I'm going to lose connection with my colleagues, and I'm not going to be able to use the technology, and I'm going to have kids at home, whatever those things are. But then once we started to experience the benefits of work from home, of no commute, of less stuff going to the dry cleaning, so I'm paying less, of getting out for a walk at lunchtime, now you can't get people back in the office. So it is the same kind of dynamic. So when you think about all the negatives, try to picture what some of the possible positives are. And that might make that okay job now seem really untenable and really give you the oomph you need to jump over and really make that move.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, Pam. And, I will leave you with one last question. In a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
Wow, what a loaded question. So much there. My entire career has really been about helping people have a better relationship with their work. Work takes up so much of our waking hours. It takes so much of our mind share. And when you're happy at work and you feel respected and valued, it has really a halo effect over the rest of your life. And conversely, when things are not going well at work, it can have a negative effect on your self-esteem, on your family, on your relationships. So I envision a future where every woman is working in a role which aligns to her interests, her skills, her passions, and her purpose, and that she's being respected and paid fairly for that work. That's my dream for the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pam. This has been an awesome conversation. I think huge key takeaways for people is to continue, be a lifelong learner, empower yourself with what's happening with AI. Look at some of those repetitive and data-driven tasks that you have and see how you can supplement and get ahead instead of putting your head in the sand, as you had mentioned. So as we wrap up today's session, let's remember that in supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and break down barriers. So go out there, champion your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape a future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.